Hi guys, it's me, Paul Bailey. I'm doing the live presentation for how to do meal prep. I'm going to give this application another go called BeLive or BeLive, yeah, BeLive TV. The last time I tried this, I managed to cut my own audio off, which was very awkward because then I had to do it all over again. So hopefully this is going to work properly this time. If you are able to join live, then fantastic. Then this is going to be your chance to ask any questions. And if you aren't able to join live, don't worry, it's all recorded and you can review this at your own leisure. But do still post comments if you have any in the comments box below. I'll go back afterwards and I'll go back and answer any questions that you have if you have any. Okay, so I'm going to try and now turn on the presentation without cutting off my audio. So here we go. Let's see if I can do this. So there's my presentation, and hopefully if I now press this button here, you can still hear the audio. If you are listening in live, if you could please post in the comments box that you can still hear me. I'd really appreciate that, just to make sure that I'm not just talking to myself. That'd be amazing. Right, so until somebody posts a comment, I can see that 3 people are watching. So come on, guys, tell me if you can hear my voice still, even though you can't see my face. I really would like to know so that you can enjoy the rest of the presentation, actually hearing what I'm saying, as opposed to just listening and, well, just looking at the slides and not hearing anything at all. All right, I'm going to assume this is working, and then hopefully people will let me know sooner rather than later if this is working or not. Right, okay, let's crack on. So today's presentation, meal prep. I've had a few questions about it, and there are a few guys. Thank you, Sean, I appreciate it. It is working, brilliant. So a few guys have spoken about meal prep, how to do it, what does it involve, why do people do it? And I also do know that a few people are actually in the group who are already doing this on a really regular basis. So I'm looking forward to seeing some of their comments and their suggestions, because this is something that they actively do on a regular basis for a variety of different reasons. So let's just move on to the next bit, which is basically, who am I? So about your coach, for those that you don't know, who don't know me very well, I'm a qualified nutrition coach, and I'm also a qualified life coach. So the two combined with means that quite often my nutrition coaching sort of blurs the line between the two, and I actually end up dealing with nutrition, but also lifestyle as well, which a lot of people who eat for during stressful periods find incredibly beneficial. It's important to note that I am diet agnostic. I don't mind which diet you're on. What I do mind is, what are you going to do after the diet? And I ask this question of a lot of people, in particular, people that are on keto, low carb, high protein, low fat, very low calorie, whatever those diets are that you're on. What are you going to do when the diet has finished, when you have achieved your goal or you're struggling to stick with it? What are you going to do? Personally, I prefer to help people be fitter and healthier just by eating better. And by eating better, I mean eating better, not cutting out what you're eating, not reducing what you're eating, not starving, but just making what you're eating better so you don't feel hungry, you don't get those cravings. And it's something that you can do for the rest of your life. It's not a diet, you're just eating better. So meal prep, who's it for? What's the point of it? Why do we do it? Why do I do it? Why do some people in the group do it? So meal prep can be really beneficial if you're trying to control the macros. And macros are a posh way of saying the proportions of your meal. So how much carbohydrate, how much protein, how much veg you have in there, how much fat you have in there, all those kind of segments of your meal. When you meal prep, it becomes much easier to make those meals proportioned correctly according to your own fitness and nutrition plan. When you also do this, it's usually a bit of a time saver, because effectively you're making several meals all at the same time, and it really doesn't increase the amount of time that you're cooking just one very much, maybe a little bit extra, but not significantly. So you're going to be finding that if you do meal prep, you will save a shed load of time cooking in the kitchen. So meal prep is not going to be for everybody, because there is some belief that the longer you leave food that's been pre-prepared, it may just give it a possibility for that food to ferment long enough to give some people a bit of a negative reaction, and that's going to be a little bit like a fatigue or a brain fog, but really only if you're particularly sensitive to the compounds that are released when food basically gets old. Obviously, if you have a freezer and a good refrigerator, then the food's going to keep good for several days in the fridge, or even several weeks or months in the refrigerator. In the freezer. But that is something that you need to be very aware of when you are doing meal prep. You're preparing food in advance. You're chopping it up. You're touching it with your hands. You're moving it from one bowl to a plate to the fridge to the freezer. It's getting much more contact, so there's a much higher possibility of it coming into some kind of bacteria as it's being moved around the kitchen. So that's something just to be aware of for those people that may have a food sort of sensitivity to certain byproducts of the fermentation process. So bottom line of meal prep is it's going to look different for absolutely everybody. Everyone's going to do it differently. They all have different needs. How the meals are going to look in each container is going to be different depending on what your calorific intake needs to be, whether you need extra protein because you're working out a lot, or if you're trying to reduce your appetite, the extra protein is going to help you as well. Those sorts of things. So it's always going to look different depending on who's going to cook it. So there's no right or wrong way. So really, if you're going to share what you're posting already, it's really just as a suggestion for somebody else, not necessarily for somebody else to say, oh, I'd have more this, that, or the other in it. It's going to be different for everybody. Now, some people are going to cook an entire day. They're going to do their breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks for the whole day, for the entire week. And that's going to take obviously quite some planning, some organization skills, and quite a bit of cooking time and preparation time to be able to do that. My personal favorite for meal prep is going to be just simply making a lunch or a dinner, just one individual meal, but making it for multiple days. So usually 3 or 4 days worth of extra food that I'll be making. And that's the way that I prefer to do it, but it's going to be different for everybody. There's also different terms that still mean meal prep. So my favorite, and the one I use all the time, is batch cooking. Basically making far too much, which some people do anyway automatically, but this is intentionally making far too much so that I can put it into separate containers as a separate meal. So for the picture here is a great example of chili. You can make a vat load of chili, whether it's vegetarian, whether it's meat-based, whether it's rammed full of vegetables, whatever you want, throw it all into the pot, leave it to simmer for an hour or so. So, it's really just preparing a few bits and pieces and throwing it in and letting it cook itself. Once that's done, I will then have one of the meals from that pot for the dinner tonight, and the rest of them I'll just portion out into plastic containers that I can either put into the fridge or the freezer, and mix it up with either some pasta, some rice, or whatever. Normally with this type of chili, I've rammed so much veg in there that I don't actually need to have an additional portion of veg in with my meal prep anyway. But if you are a meat person and you have got a meat chili and there's not a lot of vegetables in there, then I would love to see a portion of the chili, a portion of the carbohydrate, rice, quinoa, couscous, whatever you want, and another segment in there with some extra veg, just to make it that little bit better for you. Now, the one you might see the most often, especially in the group, are individually proportioned meals. So each meal is going to have a little bit of protein, a little bit of carbohydrate, and some veg mixed in there as well. Some of the ones that you may have seen in the group recently have different types of protein or different types of veg. And if you can do that, then that's great, because that's going to give you more variety. You're going to enjoy the food more, and it's just going to be a much more pleasant experience. Obviously, the downside to that, it's a little bit more prep, a little bit more work. So it's a balancing act between the two. I must admit, I tend to go for 4 meals of exactly the same thing. So in the picture here, if you had the chicken breast, I would simply do 4 portions of chicken. So I would roast or slow cook a chicken. I'd cut it into quarters, peel all the bones out of the flesh, put the muscle and the protein directly into each of the containers, and then mix that up with some rice, some quinoa, some couscous, whatever you want as the protein, and then a portion of vegetables thrown in as well. And the way that I would make that dish ever so slightly different is I would drizzle over the top either some balsamic vinegar, or some sweet chili sauce, or just some simple sesame oil or something like that, some chili oil, just to give it a slightly different flavor. But I've actually had to do no additional cooking or preparing or different types of protein or anything like that. And then the final one, which hardly anybody seems to talk about, is just simply preparing ingredients, particularly vegetables, because when you've had a busy day at work, the last thing you want to do when you get back home to prepare a nice healthy meal is to start chopping veg. It really is. It seems to be really, it just saps all the energy out of you. So the way to get around this again is to prep the veg once in the week and then save that to the side in the refrigerator, so you can just grab and go, grab a handful of mixed veggies and throw it into whatever you're doing at the time. It really doesn't take much longer if you're cooking, if you're chopping a pepper or a carrot or courgette or something like that. It really doesn't take a lot more time to do 3 of those instead of 1. So by doing that, getting them all ready, you can throw them into a Tupperware box or a plastic container or a bag or whatever you want, and put them in the freezer. If you do chop veg ready for the freezer rather than the refrigerator, then you will need to either blanch the vegetables or quickly stir fry them, just to expose the edges of the vegetables to a little bit of heat, just to make sure that they're going to be healthy when they come back out of the refrigerator or freezer after they've been in there for a little bit longer than they normally would be. And then obviously you're going to need really good containers. My preferred type of container is going to be the nesting type or stacking type, because if they don't stack, if they don't nest, they take up a lot of space in the cupboard, and it can be extremely frustrating trying to find the right lid with the right container, and you just don't need that kind of hassle. So getting a nest of containers, or a box of containers that all just nest in together. They're all the same size, but they're angled in a way that they all fit together. And then put the lids underneath the big stack of containers so that they're there waiting for you to grab and fill up with your favorite foods. So this is basically what my meal prep tends to look like. Exactly the same thing. A bit of protein, a bit of carbohydrate, and a portion of veg in there as well. If I'm having protein is going to be something like a fish or a chicken, then I am most likely going to put something in there to keep it a little bit moist. Either like here, they've got some creme fraiche, or some chili oil, sesame oil, something like that, just to give it a little bit of moisture, because when you refrigerate things, sometimes it can dry out a bit. And particularly when you freeze something, it does seem to suck a lot of the moisture out of it. So you are going to need some kind of liquid or sauce that goes on the protein, just to keep it a little bit moist for when you reheat it. Not all of these need to be reheated either, because these are going to be cooked meals once you put them in a container. So the option is there. And actually, a lot of these meals are surprisingly good when they are chilled and not heated up again. But different people like different things. So if you want to heat it up, bung it in the microwave, and you're ready to go in a couple of minutes. Now, for those of people that are always complaining that it takes too long to cook a healthy meal, this meal here is probably going to take about 30 minutes to put together. Maybe a little bit longer because you're making a little bit more and you're putting it into portions. But ultimately, you're looking at 5 meals in about 30 to 40 minutes, which, if you break it down, that's going to be exactly the same time as just buying a microwave meal and throwing it into the microwave for about 4 minutes. It really isn't that much more. It does require a little bit more planning, yes, but it's going to be massively better for you. So how do you plan it? You need to write a menu, of all things. It doesn't have to be complicated. I usually start recommending that just people pick what they cook already and just make it bigger. Maybe throw in a couple of other new recipe ideas just to keep things interesting and give you new things to try as you go through. But just keep it simple. Just do the stuff that you're doing at the moment and just make more of it. Build the meals around what's in season. That's always going to make it cheaper and more economical. And I think that's always going to be a good thing. Butternut squash in the autumn or fall, and ripe summer tomatoes in the summertime. If you're not sure where to start, batch cooking brown rice. I always tend to cook way too much rice. So it's always easy for me to be able to have some rice put aside. A few chicken breasts, and roast some vegetables. Bang, that is your meal prep done. And for most of the time, boiling the rice, roasting the vegetables, doesn't actually require a lot of work. It's just heating stuff up and getting it ready to go in. Throw it into the container, and if you want something for a little bit different, have a side salad as well. So variety versus being repetitive. Now, a lot of the guys that are posted in the group have worked really hard at making their meals different from each other. So they've got a different meal that they have each time they go for their grab box. My personal preference, and this is just me, is I prefer them to be repetitive just because it's so much easier. Like I said, getting a chicken and roasting that or putting it in my slow cooker and then cutting that up into 4 portions is so easy. It's not that much harder to throw a couple of salmon fillets onto a frying pan and grill that up at the same time as well. I'd take that. That's fine. But I just like to make things as easy as possible. And then the way that I flavor it differently is by different powder, say like paprika or cumin, different sauces like chili, sweet chili sauce, soy sauce, anything like that, just to make it a little bit different. Now, the benefit of making it a variety of different things, different proteins, different carbohydrates, etc., different vegetables, means that you're going to find it more interesting when you have your meals. You're also going to find it more enjoyable to eat those meals when they are a variety of different things. And also, if there is a meal that you don't like, chances are you don't have exactly the same thing coming up the following day. The drawback to that is having a variety means that you're probably going to eat a little bit more than you would normally if you did a repetitive meal. So a little trick here is that if you have basically the same meal 4 days in a row, you're not going to enjoy it as much. Even if you have the different sauces and different flavorings, it's technically the same food, and you kind of know that. So you're not going to enjoy it quite as much. It's still going to taste good, but ultimately you're probably not going to eat as much of it or be as sort of hungry for that meal when you actually get it. So there are pros and cons of both ways of doing that. And really that's going to be up to you to decide which is going to be the best for you. Try both, mix and match, experiment, see what works. So how many meals to prep? So this is going to depend on a variety of different issues that you will have. So issue number 1 is, how big a pot of chili can you make? How many pans do you have? How much countertop space do you have to be able to make large quantities of food? And the second one is storage. Where are you going to store this food? Do you have enough containers to store all this food? And then finally, where are you going to store it to keep it fresh? Do you have enough space in the refrigerator to keep it fresh for 4 or 5 days? And that's probably the maximum kind of time you really want to be keeping these prepped meals in your refrigerator, is about 4 to 5 days. Any longer, they're probably going to start spoiling, and they're not going to taste as good and not going to be so good for you. They're going to start losing the vitamins in the vegetables. So cooking and making enough for about 4 days is probably what I'd like to aim for. And then, of course, how much freezer space you've got is going to be your next challenge. If you are making a chili, which always freezes incredibly well, how much space have you got in the freezer to be able to do that kind of cooking and make those kind of meal prep ready for you to defrost at will? So it's going to be up to you. My recommendation is, if you're keeping it in the refrigerator, make 4, maybe 5 days worth of food. If you're keeping it in the freezer, I would normally make about 3 to 4 times a normal meal. So if I'm making a chili, I would make chili for enough for 4 meals, and then put 3 or 4 of those away in the freezer or the fridge, ready for me to go to. It's always a good idea to label up stuff, anything that you put in the freezer, because as soon as it's frozen, it just turns into another freezer container of brown stuff. So it's always a good idea to label it exactly with what's in it. And sometimes I put the carbohydrate in it with it, so the rice or the pasta or the couscous or whatever, and sometimes I don't. So I usually label up the containers with whether or not they have rice in, whether it's a big portion, so a portion for 2, or a small portion, a portion for 1, that sort of thing. So any questions from anybody that is watching live? If you're not watching live, again, don't worry. I will go back through the recording and answer any questions that do come up afterwards. And let me just put my video back on again. There we go. So if you do have any questions, don't hesitate to get in touch. Drop a comment in the comments box. Post some pictures of some of the meal prep that you've tried yourself. I know there are 2 guys that do this on a regular basis, so I'm expecting at least 2 comments and pictures of people that have done their own meal prep. And yeah, let me know how you get on. If you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to put them in the box. Now, I'm going to be sending out a copy of this presentation to anybody that wants it. All you need to do is type in the comments box, "I want to try meal prep." Type that in the comments box. I'll send you a DM with a copy of the presentation. And it's also going to contain a few links to meal prep websites that I've been using and find particularly useful. Some YouTube videos, links to websites that talk about meal prep, and some links to some of the meal preps that I've done, and some also, if you guys don't mind, some of the posts that the other guys that have been doing meal prep in the Facebook group have done as well. So I put links to that. So if you want to copy the presentation and all those links, type "I want to try meal prep" into the comments box. So I hope you have found this. Let me get rid of that one. There we go. I hope you found this useful. If there's something else you'd like me to do a live Facebook video training of, then don't hesitate to get in touch with me. Drop me a private DM if you prefer, or just post a comment into the Facebook group. Look forward to speaking to you all very soon, and take care. See ya. Bye-bye.